Spurs set up in a 4-3-3. That midfield selection was key, I felt, because they had Bentancur as the sort of deep lying pivot, picking up the ball, controlling the game. You've then got Bergvall and Madison buzzing around, threading the lines, picking pockets of space. And I felt like United's double pivot couldn't really cope with it. Bruno Fernandes, I felt really played well in possession. Off the ball, there was just so much work for him to do because Casemiro just doesn't really offer much from a defensive perspective anymore. So that sixth region in front of the back line was constantly vacant. And I almost felt United got quite lucky, even in the second half at times when Spurs would attack us in transition. They were literally running at our defense, but due to poor decision making, they weren't really being clinical with it. But this is a continuous problem area that Amorim still hasn't solved. It's been a problem for United for a long, long time, even under Ten Hag. How do you protect that defense and the space in front of that defense? Because United are constantly vulnerable in that area, and that's for me the determining factor which decided the outcome in Tottenham's favour. Because I didn't feel Tottenham were that good. I didn't think United were particularly that impressive. It was one of the lowest quality Spurs versus United games I think I've seen.
Yeah, I think just on that point about the low quality, I think if you just go back and watch the last 30 minutes, the amount of times the attacks broke down, I think that was because both teams are a little bit disjointed. Spurs, because I think Ange is still trying to figure it out again because they've had injuries, and United, because I just think there's a really low ceiling for quality, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. Um, Back to this midfield, and I don't know if this is because of commentary that my brain's thinking about this. But I just felt like the distances between Casemiro and Bruno were just too large. Like if you're just watching the game from, if you're not in the stadium, you just watch it on TV. If you just look at Bruno and you look at Casemiro, and whether you've played the game or not, the distance between midfielders, especially if you're two that play in a pair, cannot be more than 10 yards at the best of times. There were times where it looked like Bruno was playing right wing and Casemiro was playing left wing. So the midfield was actually empty.
Yeah, it's absolutely chaotic. And obviously, when you've played with a midfielder that you haven't played with often on a regular basis, it is hard to build that chemistry. So there's that defense for them. However, two very experienced players, so that they should be able to communicate throughout the game to make sure that their distances and the players around them, that their distances are also equidistant to each other and they're moving together as a unit. I didn't get the feel of a unit from that
Mm.
midfield. And then when you take in the inside forwards as well, the thing that marks out Amorim's midfields for Sporting Lisbon was they were never really a ball retention type of team. However, they were a very well organized team. That front four, well, I say front four, sorry, midfield four, two inside forwards with the two pivots would move together almost as a box in possession, out of possession. Everything was synchronized to a T. We're not seeing that at all from Amorim's midfields that we've seen from United. And if you look at that four as a combo, Xerxes and Casemiro don't really have the legs to really get around from a defensive perspective. And then Bruno and Garnacho are two very chaotic characters who they don't really scream, positional awareness and positional discipline and great leadership and communication. So as a foursome, there's no real coherence to that foursome on or off the ball. So you can understand why there was such wide spaces between these players.
Yeah, it is a mismatch in terms of profiles. I think like you can have a Casemiro, and if you watch City Newcastle, actually, Nico Gonzalez came in, and I don't think he was special, but what he did was his positioning was so clean. He was so clean in possession that then Gundogan, who's looked leggy all season, suddenly was like, oh, he's actually a very good footballer. And I think you almost like in where Manchester United are now, you have these four players playing in central zones, and all their flaws are shining through because no one's covering each other's flaws. So you got Casemiro who can't really run, Xerxes who can't really run, Garnacho who's a little bit erratic, and Bruno Fernandes who I can't really describe, to be honest. And you combine them four and you go, if you're the opposition, which is what I think Spurs did really well today, Bentancur, Madison, and Bergvall have, when I put them three together, and I don't know if you agree, I go, that's a midfield three. Like everyone has a role, everyone has a job, and Bentancur can't really run. Bergvall will for him. Bentancur can pass and keep the ball nice and tidy. Bergvall can play a little bit longer, and it then allows Madison to shine, which he did today, which is where I think the game was decided, and I think you agree. Um, he found space because it was almost like they weren't going earlier in the season when they didn't have a fully fit midfield. They were giving it to Madison and go, can you play through the lines? Can you play over the top? Can you also find the pockets? Today's the responsibility was just sit behind Casemiro and in front of that back four, and that's where we win the game.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we've been crying out for Bergwijn and Madison to kind of be in the same midfield because we felt like Madison was almost being used as every single thing in terms of picking up the ball really deep, being their central midfielder and being their number 10. And Madison just, I mean, he can kind of do all of that, but he runs out of steam. And even in this game, even though you gave him a very specific role, he still ran out of steam because by the second half, he was almost nowhere to be seen. And I think he was rightfully taken off in that second half. But the first half, he won him the game. So he did what he needed to do. And, you know, fair play to Postecoglou. He's taken what's sort of like a key component of the team off because he felt that at that moment tactically he wasn't the right player for that phase of the game. So he did well. Just coming back on to Casemiro, this is an interesting point because some players, their IQ begins to decline as they age, even though they've been a top generational level midfielder. Whereas some midfielders, or it could be any position for that matter, it doesn't matter how old they get, their touch and their IQ will stay the same. So someone like Zidane, someone like Tony Cruz, you could literally throw them in when they're 45,
Hmm.
50. I guarantee you could throw them into a pro game, they're not going to lose the ball because their touch, their everything's just going to be spot on. Casemiro strikes me as that sort of player who, now that his body's given up on him, it's like his brain's given up on him
Mm.
because it's like he probably thinks I can play that pass, but then his body's so clunky into making that pass, he'll give the ball away. And it's the same with his defensive work, like because he might think to himself, I can get there, and then he gets there second too late. And these little muscle reaction times, because they've slowed down a bit, it makes him look really stupid and clumsy. But it doesn't take away from the fact that in his prime, absolute baller on and off the ball.
Yeah, I feel it sounds bad because I haven't played for Madrid. I haven't won Champions Leagues. I feel sorry for him when I watch him. I sound like Gary Neville now. But you know when, like, I've seen this guy in his prime. I know what he can do, but his physicality was a little bit of a cheat code at times. Sometimes he'd get caught out in the wrong position, but he had these enormous legs that could almost cover the whole pitch, and he'd just chop it off someone. Now those like enormous legs are now like actually heavy legs that he can't carry.
Yeah.
And I think that like youthfulness of Spurs, having more legs, like even the battles out wide, Jed Spence, I think legs wise was perfectly fine today. But I know you want to talk about him, so I'll save that for you. And the other side, Pedro Porro, perfectly fine legs wise, quality wise. I actually quite like Pedro Porro, but I don't think he was great today. But I think the legs, and I know that's really lazy of me to say, and you probably have more to say on it than me. But every time I watch Manchester United, I go, they lose games because the other team just can outrun them, outfight them. And this wasn't one of those days, but that midfield got outrun all game, basically. Um, Talk to me about these wide areas, because you did say before we started recording, there were some positives for you from this game, and we don't just want to rip into Amram every week.
So I felt Amram's kind of listened to what people have been saying. Matsurawi moved back into the back line. We saw Dallo go onto the right side, Dorgu go onto the left side. So there were some positive changes. And I'd say energy wise down these flanks, we had good energy. So from that perspective, I felt like we were able to match Tottenham's energy in these wider areas. For example, Son Heung-min, I felt like he struggled in this game. He wasn't really doing anything in the game. And Spurs, I think they've got a slight problem here because Jed Spence and Son Heung-min, both right footers on that left flank. There's no penetration coming down that left side. Jed Spence is having to work out of his skin to try and squeeze some chemistry out of this flank because it just isn't really working. So he put in what I'd say a 20 out of 10 performance just to get a 6 out of 10 outcome from that left flank is what it felt like. From a United perspective, Dorgu made some really good runs in behind, but Garnacho just failed to spot him. So what they need, I think, in long term going forward is if you're going to have Dorgu on that flank, you need to have a higher IQ left inside forward who, yes, if Dorgu does that that run, acts as a decoy and you've got that right foot coming in to blast into the top corner, but you also need someone who's got that IQ to know, wait a minute, this is blocked off. Let me reverse that pass into a Dorgu. I'm trying to think, imagine you had like a Barcola style
Mm.
winger in that left inside forward and then you've got Dorgu flying forward. That'd be a really sexy looking left flank.
A question for you then, because obviously Manchester United have spent a lot of money, chose to keep Garnacho, obviously let go of Rashford. Obviously, the repair for this, from what we're saying, people are going to say, "Oh, just buy more players." Is there a world where you can almost repair or upgrade the existing team. Because I watched today and I thought quality won Spurs the game and they didn't have much quality, which means Manchester United's ceiling for quality is so much lower than where it should be. Because Garnacho had a great chance in the first half and he put it in row Z. And I was saying to my cousin who I was watching it with, I like Garnacho, but if he's not wearing the red of Manchester United and he's wearing the white of Fulham, he doesn't get this reputation that people are talking about. Because too many times today, his first touch was really good at times, but then decision making was bad, quality finish was bad. How do you repair that?
So for me, Garnacho is a player I would use as a wing back. We've spoken about it before.
Mm,
The reason why I put him at wing back is at wing back, you're encouraged to just literally get into wide areas and just run at players. And it's more about little gives and goals and then getting into space, timing your. And he's basically then the IQ needed for that role is lower than what's needed in an inside position. Anyone that's played football at any decent level knows at wing back, you don't really need a high end IQ, but in the number 10 role, you need a brilliant first touch. You need to be so spot on in terms of your decision making because your the space is so congested. You've got to pick and choose when you're going outside, when you're going inside. So the tactical decisions you need to make at a higher level. You need ballers in that position. Whereas out wide, a bit of trickery, a bit of pace, a bit of power. That's what you kind of need. So I think Garnacho out there would be okay, but in these inside roles, his IQ gets really exposed, and you're constantly seeing a lot of bad decisions. So anyway, for me, he doesn't matter how much you try and upgrade him. I think his core nature, there's a ceiling there for that inside position. Diallo's injured, so in terms of what profiles United have in the current squad, I don't think they have many profiles that, if any, for that role. So for me, they definitely need to bring in at least one body for that position, and it needs to be a high end ceiling, I think.
mm.
But based on right now, I would probably try and just put Bruno and Xerxes behind the Hoyland, because I think that's the only thing they've got based on this. So what I would do is Garnacho right wing back, Xerxes, Hoyland, Bruno, and then Dorgu,
Hmm.
and then I'd get another double pivot in there. I think Mainu's injured now, but it probably would still be Mainu and Ugarte, probably for me, based on who they've got. I know they've talked about Sekou Kone as well, the 17-year-old. He's someone that they could probably try and throw in there, give him some game time as well. I don't see the point of like constantly
Yeah,
trying that Ericsson or Casemiro.
I just think the balance and like football's always about combinations, right? Like back in the days, people used to play 4-4-2. So you'd always say your right back and your right midfielder needs to have a really good relationship. Your left back and your left and your centre backs, yada yada. And we haven't mentioned this yet, but I know you want to talk about it. Um, the centre backs, Maguire and Delit. We'll come to that in a second before I talk about the wing backs and the number 10s and the holding midfielder and the striker. I don't see relationships, which is why I think when I watched this game today, I said Manchester United are really bad and Spurs are not really bad. I don't know if I don't watch Spurs and go, this is a really bad football team. I think they're fairly decently coached. I can see the idea, but their idea requires really high quality, and therefore, when they lose players, they're clunky. When they make changes, they're clunky. With Manchester United, I go, this is a really bad football team, and that's because there's not any combinations anywhere. And that's where I look at Delit and Maguire, and obviously you have some words on them.
I mean, when you look at United, you see such low IQ football just and it's like these little details just keep adding up, and it just gets so frustrating. These details include, for example, let's just say someone's out wide and he's made the run. Play the ball in front of him so he can take it into his stride. But no, they play the pass behind him, so then he has to come back and take that touch. Or like Onana's throwing when you can see that flipping out Casemiro's ran in front of you. Dorgu's about to get intercepted. No, I'm going to throw it straight in between both of them for Paro to intercept. You've got moments like bloody hell, like Harry Maguire doing my nutting. We did a video once on United's tactics, and I did a timer on the amount of time Maguire spends on the ball. And it's like, God, he takes about 10 touches and he takes about 8 seconds to then play that pass. And you're taught from a very young age, even in youth football, it's tempo. Play as soon as you see that the ball is faster than you are. We saw United are 1-0 down. What does Maguire do? He picks up he's done well. Like he's picked up an interception. Ball's kind of over the top. You've then won that ball. There's 4 players in front of you who are unmarked. Just give one of them the ball. You've done your job. You've intercepted. Give them the ball because you're close to your goalkeeper. You play that pass, which is about, say, 25 yards. You've progressed it in the blink of an eye. Then what does he do? He carries it 4 or 5 touches to get to the same line where those four players already were, and then he just hits a long ball. And you're thinking that's taken you about 15 seconds to do by the like you're like a Soviet tank from the 1940s, and you've taken so long to get to that point to do nothing in terms of progression. Now someone might think that's being really anal about it, but if you do these little stupid things constantly throughout the whole game, it leads to such bad rhythm and bad circulation of the ball. Pep would not allow that to happen. He'd be so pissed off that his centre backs picked up the ball in the wrong area, played it into the wrong player, played it with the wrong weight, played it into the wrong feet. All these little things are the top coaches are so analytical about it. And I feel like United have not been analytical about it for a decade.
I think you said then. Actually, I'm reading a book called, I think it's called Atomic Habits. If you've ever read it, um,
No, I haven't read it.
brilliant book. But in that book, he basically says that stress compounds, things compound, good habits compound. More importantly, and if every day you do one good habit and that gains 1% for you, every day you gain 1% over 365 days in a year, you gain 365%. For Manchester United, it's the reverse. If Maguire's played a late pass to, let's say, Delit's played a late pass to Dorgu. Dorgu's played an overhit pass to Bruno. Bruno's played a late pass to Casemiro. Casemiro's played an underhit pass to Hoyland. You're 5% down before you even reach the other end of the pitch. And I think that's the point you're making. And I think I'm a Liverpool fan, so I should be enjoying this. But I sit and watch this Tottenham United game today and go, I've wasted my Sunday evening watching this level of football. I watched Celta Vigo against Atleti yesterday. Celta Vigo, I think, are 8th in the league, and they were popping a ball around. Like their fullback Minguez is playing crossfield passes. Their left back's taking it down on his knee, fizzed it into strike, and I'm going, I see connection. I see like build up. I see style. I watched this game, man. Go on.
You're gonna laugh because I went to my daughter's football today, and people might be wondering how's this relevant to this game. But basically, two of the kids that were in goal before my daughter's turn, right? The distribution was like flipping Anana on steroids. Like my daughter's like brilliant, like in terms of moving up the ball. She's pulled out wide, right? Pulled out to the left wing, which I've been telling her to do, and she goes pass, pass. The kid looks at her, totally ignores it, and just literally lumps it overarm throw straight into midfield where they had four players, the opposition did. They've just counter-attacked, boom, scored, right? He's done the same thing 3 times. My wife's looking at me and I'm just like, this kid, like, he can't throw a bloody ball. Like, he's doing my nutting, right? And she's like, they're just kids, leave it, leave it. Then the next goalkeeper comes, same thing. And I'm like, anyway, I think because I'm a United fan and I see this stuff,
Yeah.
it's like, even when I'm watching it in kids football, it's like, doing my nutting.
Yeah.
She goes in goal, and like straight away, you could just see the massive difference where she's looked, put a foot on the ball. She's seen that one of the players has pulled that wide. She just played it straight into his feet. And then from there, they've gone, scored. And I was like, why can't they just, like these are little basics, but I think you need to get this shit right from a
Mm.
young age, And the fact that I'm annoyed about it, even with kids football, I'm having to bloody watch this stuff for United. It makes me rage.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
look, I hear it. I was sat, and obviously we have to sit here and we analyze the game. And like we said earlier, I think it's very clear that the game was decided in a 20, 30-minute spell by probably the player on the pitch with the highest IQ, Madison. I would say, yeah, he's probably the highest IQ on the pitch. He finds pockets, and in those pockets, Spurs won the game. Because after that, it was a helter-skelter game, end to end. Like you really and truly, you were waiting for a deflected goal or a worldie from somewhere. But I never felt like this was going to be 3-2 in the end, unless it became disgustingly scrappy. And I think that is the difference between these two sides. When Spurs have their players fit, the IQ is a lot higher. And for Manchester United at the moment, the IQ is pretty low. And I do feel for Amorim in that regard, because at the moment, he can't really do much with it. Anything else? I think we pretty much. I don't know how we've managed to talk 20 minutes about this game.
I don't know. I've been raging about so many different things and throwing so many random things. I think that's enough for me. I think.
Yeah. Well, if you've enjoyed this episode of The Insight, then do let us know. It'll be on YouTube, Spotify, all the other platforms, audio and video. It's obviously going to be on socials as well. So if you've come from there, make sure you subscribe, follow the pod, and obviously follow PyTag, and we'll see you on the next one.